By the year 222 AD, the military camps of Rome were boiling with rage. Their emperor, the teenage priest Elagabalus, was running a decadent, volatile court that openly mocked Roman discipline. A mutiny was imminent. The only person who saw the coming collapse was the true power behind the throne, the Severan matriarch, Julia Maesa. She realized her grandson's erratic behavior was going to get their entire family slaughtered. To save the dynasty, Maesa executed a desperate political maneuver. She forced Elagabalus to formally adopt his own 13-year-old cousin, Alexander, legally installing the boy as the new heir to the empire. Elagabalus quickly understood that this quiet, popular boy was a direct threat to his life. He attempted to have Alexander murdered, but the plot unraveled, triggering exactly what Maesa had feared, a violent uprising from the Praetorian Guard. The guards stormed the imperial quarters, hacking Elagabalus and his mother to death. To show their absolute contempt, the soldiers dragged the bodies through the streets and threw them into the Tiber River. In the bloody aftermath, a 13-year-old boy was crowned master of the Roman world. This transition proved an ominous reality. The Senate no longer chose who ruled Rome. The army did. Surprisingly, the young Severus Alexander actually tried to be a good emperor. He immediately handed legislative authority back to the Senate, creating a 16-man advisory council to govern through civic law rather than imperial whim. He also introduced a policy of profound religious tolerance. In his private chapel, he prayed every morning before a collection of statues that placed Abraham, Jesus, and Orpheus side by side. Alexander poured the state's resources into massive urban renewal. He meticulously restored Rome's decaying historical monuments, including the Colosseum. His administration financed vast infrastructure projects, funding major renovations to public spaces, like the Baths of Caracalla, and completing the Aqua Alexandrina, the last of the great aqueducts of ancient Rome. These civilian triumphs created the illusion of a returning golden age, but it was a fragile facade. Alexander was prioritizing civic virtues and public works in an empire that was becoming aggressively militarized. Furthermore, the emperor wasn't actually making the decisions. Absolute control rested with his mother, Julia Maesa. Her suffocating grip on the administration stripped Alexander of any independent authority. Her jealousy dictated state policy. When Alexander married, Maesa felt threatened by the new empress. She forced her son to exile his teenage wife and execute his father-in-law. The emperor complied, openly weeping as the orders were carried out. To keep the military in check, Maesa relied on Domitius Ulpianus. He was a brilliant jurist and the Praetorian prefect, tasked with forcing the rowdy legions to submit to strict civilian law. The Praetorian Guard violently rejected Ulpian's discipline. The tension exploded into a massive 3-day urban battle in the streets of Rome, pitting the heavily armed guards against the city's own citizens. The riot reached a horrific climax when mutinous soldiers smashed their way into the imperial palace. They cornered Ulpian and murdered him right at the feet of the terrified emperor. The entire Roman army now saw exactly what they were dealing with. Their good emperor was a powerless puppet, incapable of protecting his own chief minister, let alone defending the borders of the empire. And those borders were about to fracture. In the east, a massive and highly organized new threat suddenly emerged: the Sassanid Persian Empire. Alexander marched his legions out to meet them, but his mother's over-caution infected the command tent. The young emperor hesitated, paralyzing the Roman counteroffensive. Because Alexander failed to advance and support his flanks, a massive Roman column was completely surrounded and slaughtered by Persian forces. Alexander survived the conflict and returned to Rome, but the Eastern campaign was a political disaster. The battle-hardened legions stripped away whatever thin respect they still held for their commander-in-chief. The final crisis came shortly after, when Germanic tribes breached the Rhine frontier. Alexander and his deeply demoralized army were forced into a grueling march north to repel the invasion. But instead of ordering his men into combat, Alexander and his mother tried to buy their way out of the war, offering heavy bribes to the Germanic tribes in exchange for peace. For the Roman legions, this was the ultimate cowardice. Disgusted by an emperor who would rather pay barbarians than fight them, the troops entirely abandoned their allegiance. They needed a leader who understood violence, and they found one in Maximinus Thrax. He was a hulking, lower-class soldier who represented the exact opposite of Alexander's refined, peaceful civic virtue. Mutinous soldiers stormed the imperial camp at Mainz. They found the 26-year-old emperor hiding in his tent, weeping and blaming his mother for the disaster, before the troops hacked them both to death. The assassination of Severus Alexander ended his dynasty, but it also killed the Roman ideal of civilian rule. By crowning a brutal soldier like Maximinus Thrax, the army plunged Rome into 50 years of civil war and foreign invasion, proving that in a world governed by swords, civic virtue without military strength is a fatal combination.